So I have here our ebony blank, which we're going to use for the fretboard. I have a love-hate relationship with ebony. It's so hard. It's hard to work with. But it looks beautiful, and it lasts longer than I will. It's great stuff. So the first thing we're going to do with this blank, which is quite long, is we're going to cut it off at 18. Well, I'm going to square one end, and I'm going to cut it off at 18.5 inches. The piece we cut off the end, it'll have enough there for maybe one or two bridge blanks, which we'll keep, which we may or may not use in this guitar. We haven't made our mind up yet. But we'll go and cut that off the table saw at 18.5. Then the remaining piece, I will, using the thickness planer and the table saw, dimension down so that it is 7/32 thick by the 18.5 wide or long, and then 2.5 inches wide. Okay, so I've done that. It's all dimensioned down now. Now you want to take a look at it, and certainly if you used a power plane like I have, it's not uncommon to get a little bit of a snipe in the ends of it here where it's not quite the same level. Not only that, but one end you have squared off on the table saw to make sure it's square. They may both be square. Either way, this end that is square, you want to mark that because that's the nut end. We're going to end up cutting the other end off eventually when we get to cutting the fret slots. And you want to take a look and figure out which side is the flattest, because that flattest side is the one we're going to use to glue down to the neck. So mark that as the bottom, and then we can move on to cutting the slots for the frets. Right, so I've got the fretboard blank made up here, those dimensions, and I've got the surface I've identified is going to be the top, and I have it up. And I just clamp the block to my bench here so I can butt that against there. Now, I have a ruler. I have a 2-foot ruler here that is marked off in 64ths of an inch. And I also have a table which I have prepared which tells me where all the frets go. And I take the ruler and put it against the block as well. And I mean, on this ruler, as many steel rulers, the engraved marks are actually etched into the metal, so there's a bit of indentation there. And I take my X-Acto knife with that aligned on there and actually stick it right into the groove and then mark down onto the wood to mark all the locations. I'm going to go up the side without things moving and do that. So for instance, first fret is at 1 27/64. So I'll line this on the edge of the fretboard and go to 1 27/64. 24, 25, 26, 27. And just put a little nick there. And then the next one, 2 49/64. And then continue all the way up the fretboard until I run out to the end. I mean, there's going to be 20 frets on this fretboard, and I'll mark all the way to 21 because that's where we're going to cut the fretboard off. 4 3/64. Now then, having notched those all the way up there, I simply take my square and line it up on a notch mark and scribe that line all the way across the fretboard with my X-Acto knife. Now, the other thing you should notice about making this, the fret saw has just about no kerf on it at all, as far as it cuts a slot precisely the right thickness for fret wire. Especially when you're cutting in ebony, it binds very easily once you get down into the wood. So I keep an old candle sitting here, and all I do is just run the blade through the candle to get the blade coated in wax. And when you do that, the blade will not bind. Well, will not bind as easily anyway, and works a little better. It's still hard. So I get that lined up with the square, and I just use a square for the first little bit until I get the cut going into the wood. So it's going to be stable for me. Now after you've cut a few fretboards using the hand fret saw method, you'll get tired of doing it. So an alternate method of doing this is to use a blade in your table saw. Now, it's hard to see, but in my table saw I have mounted a very fine jeweler's blade, a 23 thousandths of an inch curved jeweler's blade. And I have raised it an eighth of an inch above the top of the table. These things, I just purchased this one for about $40 Canadian. They have to be special ordered, but they're well worth the money if you're going to do more than one guitar. And all I've done here is on my square on the table saw, I've taken and made up this template out of one piece of paneling, and I've drawn a line where each one of the frets goes, right up from the, here, this is the nut end, and this is the sound hole end. And I just clamped it onto my T-square here, and aligned with a line that I made by running this through the saw. So I know exactly where the blade is. And then the blank, I've already finished this one, I place on there underneath that piece of wood. Oh, I moved it there. Underneath, get the edge of it lined up with a line. And then all I do is I run this through like so, and line up the nut end of my blank with the lines, and then run it through, and then the next fret line, and run that through, and the next fret line, and run that through, until I finish. And if you are careful about this setup, and hold it steady and everything, you'll get a fretboard in about 5 minutes that's completed, and even, and done nicely. So, if you're going to make several guitars, I would recommend going the expense of buying a specialized blade for your table saw. Save your wrists. Don't get carpal tunnel. Next, we need to lay out the side of the fretboard. So what I've done is I've drawn a center line down the top of my fretboard here, and then I've indicated here at the nut end the width of it, which is, in my case, 1 11/16, right? Yes, 1 11/16 wide here at the nut. And then up here at the 12th fret, it's 2 1/4 on the scale length and size I'm making. And then I've simply joined those lines with a pencil line to give me the slope of the side of the fretboard. Then next we need to then take the material off down to that line. You can do this in several ways. You can just put this in a clamp and use a block plane or any kind of plane to go along there with. You can rough it out on the bandsaw and sand it on, or you can go to your bench sander and just sand down to the line. Whatever method you want to use, get down to the line is fine. Just be careful that don't go past the line, because you don't want to have the fretboard too narrow in any spot. Okay?